Welcome, everybody. This is Adam Barr with Uplifters podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, John Quinn. And let me share a little bit with you the intention of the program, of the podcast today. So, Uplifters, what it is a power packed podcast where we host successful business owners and entrepreneurs and community focused individuals and professionals who are committed to inspire and live extraordinary life. So what we do, we dive into real open conversation, authentic conversations about life, about business, about relationships, about success, failures, struggles, obstacles, and then the challenges that we have experienced and the entrepreneurs that are successful today went through in their life. And then we share the triumph and the experiences, and more specifically, what is the mindset that was behind it, and maybe give you some insights and inspire you and motivate you to keep your life go the way that you want and to uplift yourself. So without further ado, allow me to introduce to you John Quinn. And John is an experienced submariner, an engineer, a stock trader, a business leader, and an entrepreneur. He's driven by the passion to enable regenerative medicine to make reversing the devastating impact of a stroke a real possibility. And John co-founded Exos Aerospace in 2015. So, John, thank you so much for being on the show with us. So,
Thanks for having me, Adam. It's exciting. I love your mission, and it so aligns with having taken risk in business, and that's a good thing.
yes. So tell us, the community, our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you got started in the industry that you're in today.
Yeah, so long story, but started my career Navy submarines, exploring the depths of the oceans, right? And then on to power industry for a good number of years. Year 2000 hit. 2000, 2001, one of those big market bubbles. And, I had somebody else managing my finances, and that didn't go so well. They managed to lose about 40% of my retirement. So I went from retiring at 55 to 65. Flash forward, 07, 08 happened, and another market crash, right? I went from 65 to like 85, but there's a problem. Life expectancy is about 84 at that point. So I had to do something different. I went to a seminar to learn how to trade stocks, met this guy named David Mitchell. And at that time, I learned how to trade stocks. I was able to quit my job a couple years later, build some submarine technologies, getting back to what my passion was. I mean, when I was on a submarine, it was all about making things safer for us on the boat, right? Just like anyone frontline in the military, you're always coming up with ideas how to make it better, faster, cheaper, easier, and using what's there. And those challenges just drove me. So I started a company, developed some technologies, and the military found a way to use those. Of course, unfortunately, they used another contractor to do it. Probably one much more capable than my company was. But God opened another door with an opportunity for the guys I had working for me on that project to keep them going back to space. And they had flown hundreds of flying vehicles, or made hundreds of rocket engines, dozens of flying vehicles. And at that point, I was able to move from the depths of the ocean to the far reaches of space. And here we are, 5 years later, still on that journey. And then we'll talk about that mission here in a bit.
Extraordinary. This is exactly what we're talking about. We are sitting here, we listen to you, I'm listening to you, and I'm just wondering what goes through the audience mind. And, someone in your shoes, right? You must have started somewhere where maybe in your childhood or in your youth or in your young adult life, you had a vision or a mission or something that was important to you that brought you to this point. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a humbling conversation because, I wasn't the brilliant kid in school. My sister was. She was the one with the photographic memory. She'd read a book and you'd ask her, third sentence, page 27, what's it saying? And, she could rattle it off. And it's like I had to work for everything, right? I
Yeah.
wasn't a brilliant student in school unless I was interested. And I fell in love with electronics. So where I shined was American history. I hated it. Uh, didn't excite me at all. But in my junior year of high school, I got to go to my instructor and say, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. You give me a fourth hour in electronics every day, and I will just show up for your exams and to turn in my work every day. If you let me do that and spend another hour over there where I want to be, I'll guarantee I'll keep an A in your class. And it was the best I ever did in school. I got a 98 in his class. Didn't particularly like it, but he allowed me to do what I was passionate about. And that passion for electronics and really led me in my career and helped me to do things that I love to do. Um, and I was caught in the rat race for a good 20 years in the power industry, and something clicked, right? And that entrepreneurial spirit came out where I realized that, the system as it is going to give you the opportunity that you make. So you don't have to be some brilliant, I had a great childhood, I was top of my class, I was valedictorian. No, you just have to have a passion for something. And if you go after that passion with everything you've got, there's nothing that can hold that person back.
Yeah. And and that's really in itself very uplifting. What are some of the biggest humbling and challenging experiences that you've experienced? Because what I'm hearing from you is that you shared, maybe you weren't the one with the photographic memory, but yet you have used that or some sort of a mechanism to find or identify or discover or explore something else that you could make something great with, right? Or something great of. And so how does that happen in your life today, right? Or throughout the progression of your career, life, relationship? And then what challenges happen and the lessons that they taught you?
That's a great one. Um, you know, when you look back, the hardest decision is deciding to follow your passion. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be dramatic. You have to quit your job to follow your passion, right? Um, but at some point, it's a stepping out of the boat event and believing in faith that no matter what it takes, you're going to go do it. And I believe the person who can make that decision will look back years later and say, wow, if I hadn't done that, where would I be today? And I look back at that day, wow, it's now 9 years ago, coming up on 10 years on January 21st. I remember certain dates. My wife and I were married January 24th, 1991, so we're about to celebrate 30 years together, right?
Wow.
But I remember January 20th of 2011 because that's the day I sat in my first stock trading seminar, because I knew that somebody else having control of my finances wasn't going to work. And that was a pivotal moment in my life because 24 months later, well, actually 18 months later, I'm telling my boss I can't afford to work for him anymore. And that was a challenging 70-hour-a-week job. I found 20 hours a week on top of that 70-hour-a-week job to commit to learning stock trading. And I did it for 6 months at that pace. And then I got to the point where I was investing real money and doing those things. And it was sheer perseverance. Anyone can do these things if they put their mind to it. We have an innate built-in ability to do the things we're passionate about. I truly believe that for every person, whether it's sewing, or it's crafts, or it's mechanics, or it's electronics, or even putting together a space company and having the business people around you to lift you up. It's not about what you can do. Very many times it's about people who will inspire, like the Adams of the world here, who can go out and say, you know what, challenge yourself, get out there and do it, because the only thing holding you back sometimes is our own fear.
Yeah, thank you. Someone once told me that the problems and the challenges and the hardness in life, they're merely flags. They're showing you that there is an opening here for a new possibility. And that's something that stuck with me for many, many years. And, and another thing that I read about is the split second decisions that we get to make. There's multiple small decisions that we make every day that are just like transformation for our life, right? And sometimes we just keep making those decisions, either not to make a new decision and or just like not challenge the status quo that is keeping us where we are, or makes a difference for us when we redirect that energy or disrupt that pattern. So, you said something to the effect that you're fired your boss, right? So tell me what you mean by that, and how did you empower yourself by doing that?
Yeah, so I love the term. I know if I'm teaching a stock trading class, because out of that I ended up getting a license to be an investment advisor rep. But it got me to the point where I had the confidence that I could earn a living without being dependent on someone else. And it's a huge adaptation, but it did take, I literally went to the vice president of a 15,000 person company and said, hey, I just can't afford to work here anymore. I'm making more part-time trading stocks, and my entire retirement is tied up in this company fund that I can't trade. So I just can't afford to work here. And he said, well, let's talk. And he introduced me to some ways that I could talk to certain people that you normally wouldn't expect to have access to. And so I stayed on for another year. I think that was a pretty good opportunity. But after that next year, I realized things weren't going to evolve for me. So I decided, you know what? It's time to basically quit. But I prefer saying fire my boss, because it's the mentality of that.
Yeah.
Is that you're taking control of your life. You're making a decision to move forward, to walk in. For me, it was what I was passionate about. And, 20 years ago on that Navy submarine, I had an idea. And somebody believed in me. My captain of the submarine believed in me. And he let me launch a very rudimentary PVC and rubber and small amount of electronics device out of the 3-inch launcher on a submarine. And it confused who we were playing battle war games against. They thought it was the submarine, right? Mm-hmm. So, that was very rudimentary. It was a risk. But 20 years later, I remember the success of that day. And it wasn't, that wasn't a quit the job moment. That was I built something. It worked. What could it do if I dedicated a couple of years to it? And the military agreed with that assessment, and today they have that because of what I was able to do. But it was one decision, but it was also someone who believed in me, and I think that's a key. Often you are who your friends are. We've all heard that statement. I know my kids hated it because we were trying to influence them. But put yourself around people who are going to lift you up and who are going to encourage you to walk in your passion. And I think you'll find that it'll really change the course of your life. That captain, I've actually called him and told him this story, saying that, your belief in me 20 years ago is why I'm flying rockets to space today. And so I think that kind of answered the question.
Yeah, it is. It's extraordinary journey on how you empowered yourself financially and how you got to what you're doing today. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing today. You share a video with me of Dr. Zubair, Abba Zubair, and it was just absolutely fascinating what the possibilities are. So why don't you share with us what it is?
Yeah, so it goes actually beyond Abu Zubair. I met Center for Applied Space Technologies, Larry. And Larry was the guy who was putting this program on, really had the vision that aligned with Dr. Zubair as the researcher. And Center for Applied Space Technologies arranged to do some payloads on our rockets. And today we're one of 3 in the world who are flying reusable rockets under a launch license. Now, everybody knows SpaceX with 6,000 and Blue Origin with 3,500. Our little company with 20 is able to fly a reusable rocket. But what drove that was Larry's vision and Center for Applied Space Technologies with Mayo Clinic, Dr. Zubair. And it was, they were using stem cells, MCE cells, to be activated on the International Space Station on a Falcon 9 flight in 2017. And it's regenerative medicine. So our stem cells could actually restore control that in an OR, we just can't treat things like that. And I give you an example. A 19-year-old is paralyzed from the neck down in a car accident. It's inoperable. They say you're paralyzed. It's going to be that way for the rest of your life. But he was treated with active stem cells. Very hard to make on Earth. To actually get the activation, the survivability rates are a challenge. And as I shared Dr. Zubair's video, it was very encouraging that he could send those cells to space, and the potential was so much better. The activation was fast. Within weeks, we had what would take months on Earth. And Earth is a horrible place to make things. It really is. We have this atmosphere. There's dust. There's dirt in the atmosphere.
Gravity, yeah.
There's gravity to contend with. And in space, while it's a challenge for us as humans, manufacturing works great in space. We can do all sorts of crazy things we can't do here on Earth. So I caught that vision. And my ultimate vision is that we could take those cells, 1,000 pounds at a time, put them up in space, have them orbit the Earth for 2 or 3 weeks, whatever we determine that time frame is, then bring them back and treat thousands of patients with stem cell therapy. And today it hits nearer to home than ever, because the research that Dr. Zubair was doing was for hemorrhagic strokes. My dad has actually had 2 strokes. Hemorrhagic was one of them, the second stroke. It's messed up his vision, his balance. He walks with a walker now. And I just got off the phone with my friend Larry just a few minutes ago, actually before this call. And we were talking about, it's Larry Harvey. And we were talking about his neighbor 2 doors down was actually in the study that Mayo Clinic is doing in the clinical trials, and he couldn't walk. He walked with a walker, and through the phase 1 trials, Larry said, I don't even know where he is now. He's off traveling somewhere, but he's walking 5 miles a day now, and basically totally restored. And these types of stroke is the number 5 killer in the world. So what if we could fly our rockets and literally put a payload up there that comes back and can really, it's an injection, could actually evolve to where we pull your stem cells out, we fly them to space, we activate them, we put them back into you. And they're active. And they naturally go to restore whatever it is that's going on in your body without having to have the trauma that normally activates them. Mm. And there's a company in Houston that put it best. Stem cell therapy is helping people age better. And they're not making wild claims, but then you see the cases where they inject a lady's knee, 84-year-old lady I read this case study on. Her patella was rubbing up against her knee and causing pain. They injected her with stem cells. It started to restore the cartilage on the bottom of her kneecap, and it did have side effects. Her varicose veins went away. Her blood circulation in her leg was restored. And that one hit home because my grandmother had diabetes. They said she was going to have to lose her leg. And we said no. We treated it, and she didn't lose her leg. She, when she passed, she still had that leg. Wow. But those are the things that are going to change the world. And, having a viable company that makes money is great. I hope to get in the black one of these days. But the real reward is if we can heal one person. I mean, imagine the difference in a life of that 19-year-old who now can function. Now multiply that by thousands. And how do you change the world?
Wow. Yeah, every person that I talk to who are up to big things and playing a big game in life and surround themselves with high performers is, have a true belief that everything is possible, right? But what I wanted to explore a little bit, maybe because people on the outside, right, when they look at it, they say, oh, that's, they just have a different reality, a different life, different environment, right? Everything like that. But we all have fears and anxiety and self-defeating thoughts. And if you're open to it and you can share some of those with the audience, and also what do you say to yourself, in order to continue moving forward and continue growing and uplifting yourself from that situation?
Yeah, I think, wow, honestly, I couldn't have done it without my wife. There's one person who's a rock. I mean, imagine coming home, Adam, and saying to your wife, you know what? I'm tired of this secure job that I've got. I know I'm, doing really well with it, but, I want to take everything out of our retirement account and I want to go follow this dream to go make something bigger than what I'm doing today. Wow. So I start there. That I had that support person in my life. For some of you, it may be a parent. For others, it may be just a best friend. But find that person that lifts you up and encourages you. That's the biggest difference. The challenges, wow. You've taken everything. Everything's on the line. You've mortgaged your house. And why? Because you can't make payroll this week. COVID's hit and things have changed. The world market has changed. Your normal source of revenue is not there. But you find a way to keep your people paid and keep them working. Boy, those are the big challenges. Those are the times you say, was it all worth it? Yeah. And as we have those lows, the highs where a research experiment that you flew on flight 1 that had 20% cell survival goes to 60% cell survival on flight 2 and 85% cell survival on flight 3. And you say, wow, we've done in a matter of 9 months what wasn't possible in the prior 50 years. Wow. And we look at our space program and we celebrate 50 years since Apollo. And, I look back and say, you know what? We have the capability with technology to leapfrog what our ancestors did. And what are we doing to leverage that? Information access to information is so amazing with the internet. If you don't know how to do it and you're afraid of it, go look at somebody who's done it and then add your twist of your vision of how it could work. And I'm going to give you now the fifth grader's response to that question. Actually, Adam, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay. Sure.
I need a prop. Okay, imagine this is a test tube. It's got water in it. And you're a fifth grader in school, and you put a heating element on this end, and you put 3 temperature probes across the tube. And their experiment was to see if that, in the vacuum of space, if the heating element would heat the water and hit those 3 temperature elements at the same time in a vacuum as it would in the atmosphere. Now, sounds like a pretty cool experiment. And they proposed it. It came in a small CubeSat, much like this, 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. And they put that experiment in here, power supply, everything. Fifth graders now. And I said, well, guys, I love your experiment, but I need one more thing from you. And so here's where I'm going to put you on the spot, Adam.
Okay.
How are you going to keep that water from ending up all over my other experiments if it breaks and leaks out of this lid? So I'm going to put a clock on you. You got a 10-second shot clock. And you have to tell me how you're going to keep that water from leaking out of here if the test tube breaks.
If we have gravity or no gravity?
No gravity. Okay, so it's going to go up weightless, so the water droplets could just come out and float around.
Yeah.
Okay, we're in space. Look behind me. That's where we are.
Yeah.
So do you seal this box up? What do you do?
You open it, right? You open it to let that back in?
Yeah. So here's what they came up with. Okay. Now, a lot of people would say, well, you seal the box, so this becomes a secondary containment, right?
Right.
And that's a good idea. But it's kind of heavy to seal this box up. Here's what they came up with. This is fifth graders. They called the Love's Diaper Company. And they said, hey, what do you guys use to absorb the water in your diapers? And they said, well, we got this powder. They said, well, we're trying to do an experiment. And the space company said that we've got to come up with a way to capture the water. So they took that test tube and they put diaper powder all over it. And then they encased it in silicone. Wow. And guess what? That Love's diaper powder was super light, so it didn't hardly add any weight to their payload. Just remember, when it's going to space, I mean, this costs $6,000 to send to space, so it's not, more than the high school uniforms, but it costs some money, so weight is important.
Yeah.
But it was a creative way of thinking that in my 50s, I might not have thought of, because I would have looked for that fancy engineering solution.
Right.
And they were just like, how do I capture water? It was a brilliant idea, and those kids had better idea than I did for capturing it. So,
yeah, we talked a little bit about how kids' mind is boundless in terms of their creativity, where, there's no imposition of societal norms and stuff like that. They still haven't, submerged themselves of how they're supposed to think, which is really fantastic. So, John, what's the most rewarding part of what you do today?
I actually found it several years ago. And as I got to that 18-month point, and I told my employer that I couldn't afford to work there anymore, I went to building a team. And I trained 12 people how to do what I was doing. And a year later, I sat back and I watched them execute on what I had taught them. And at that point, in that last year working there, I did more than I did in the prior 16 years, because I created a legacy of a dozen people who could go do what I had done. And I think the company I worked for, I think I logged up $41 million worth of savings for the company while I was there. I wonder what happens if I go back and look at those 12 who
Yeah.
I taught those concepts to. So the most rewarding thing, building a team and enabling people to walk in their passion.
Yeah.
I think the world would be a different place if people did what they were purposed to do as opposed to what they felt they had to do. And, you know, that's the difference between the entrepreneur and the 9 to 5 person who's doing it because they've got to pay the bills. Um, there's risk, but without risk, there is no reward. And, that principle will stand forever. There's that risk reward trade off. So even if it's a little bit, dedicate 10% of your time to your passion. Heck, figure out what your passion is. I've been in a room of 100 people teaching, and I said, how many people know what their purpose is? If I put $10 million in your account today, what would you be doing tomorrow?
Yeah.
And very few of them say, oh, I'd be going into work because I work. The ones that say it is, I work at the food pantry, I work at a shelter, I work at a women's center, and I absolutely am passionate about what I do. I change lives. Those are the ones who raise their hand because they found it. But the other 9 people in the room, or 90 people in the room, will scratch their head and say, 2 or 3 days later, they still can't tell me what that is, but maybe they have an idea. So I challenge everybody who's on with us today. Figure out what your passion is and put 10% of your time into it.
Yeah. And, purpose has a massive power, right? It was said that when your purpose is bigger than your fear, there's nothing that you wouldn't be able to accomplish, right? Everything is possible when we really are committing to a purpose. So
absolutely,
you talked about your wife as your rock. And then I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that I talk to, the leaders that I talk to, have mentors and other people that, not only kind of are an example to them or inspiring them, but also challenging them. So what do you think are the good quality of a leader? You're inspired the people that were on your team, you taught them a lot. So the quality of a leader, and what do you look for in a mentor today?
um, one is transparency. um, I had somebody in my life that was a business mentor many, many years ago when I was still back in the power plants. Um, I saw him act on his beliefs, right? So he wasn't just saying that he believed in something, he was living it out. And when you find that person who has a passion, they've gone after it, and they're living it out, and you know, that's a person that I want to pattern my life after. That's the person I respect. And I believe if you can carry that on, you will change generations. And I look at my life growing up. I mean, I went into the Navy 18 years old, uh, you know, kind of forged my way through that. And I look at my daughters, and I got a regular job, right? But I look at my daughters, and they're both running their own businesses. At 21 and 24, they both had their own business. So it's not even about what I'm doing. It's what have I inspired? What's my ultimate legacy? It's my kids, and it's how it affects their lives, and how their lives and their example affects their friends around them. So um, those people uh, that you really are inspired by what they're doing and not just what they're saying are the ones that can really change kind of your own perspective. And boy, there's nothing more powerful for me than looking at the darkest day when I'm trying to figure out how to make payroll and I'm selling a car or mortgaging my house to do it, to look back and say, yeah, what would that particular mentor be doing today? And he wouldn't get caught up in the now, but he'd be thinking, you know, what's a year from now? How can I make something good out of this and make lemonade out of the lemons?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's more about the actions and the results and the decisions that people are making every day. You know, there's a lot of people who talk about it, but you know, we want to see the results and the outcomes, and you know how someone deals with a challenge that really show us what's their true characters. Um, you know, you talked about legacy. So what is the legacy that you would want to leave behind?
Oh, nothing big. I just want to change how medicine works. I want to go from a society where we rely on drugs very often. I'm sure the biomed companies aren't real happy about that statement, but honestly, I want to see us go from drugs that today usually mask symptoms because we don't find out what the problem is, and sometimes the side effects are worse than what we're actually suffering from, to a world where regenerative medicine is the primary response, and a holistic approach to extending our lives and taking care of ourselves uh, is in the forefront rather than as an afterthought when all else has failed and none of the drugs can treat what you have. Then we look to the holistic approach or the more natural healing of, for example, active stem cells and stem cell therapy and some of those regenerative medicine things that are coming around. So my legacy, I'm living part of it because I can't be more proud of both my daughters who have their own business and, you know, don't work for a boss. They have that freedom that it took me 40 some years to get to. Um, but beyond that, I just want to change the way medicine is done.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you so much. So, John, how can our audience support or contribute or do something that would create a win-win for you and your company? What do you want people to take away from this conversation?
Yeah. Wow. If yeah, beyond just what I want them to take away, imagine a world where we actually had cure for stroke and Parkinson's and heart disease, because these are all things that have promise with stem cell therapy. Um, if you're, I don't care if you're kindergarten through 12th grade to, you know, in university, go to www.exosaero.com, exosaero.com, and inquire about putting a payload in space. Has nothing to do with us. It's totally what can you imagine that you might be able to do better in space in a vacuum, uh, and figure out how to do that experiment. And that's my biggest reward because I saw a payload come from India, and in this little container, high schoolers put 27 experiments, and it had everything from our DNA to uh, scintillation counters to radiation counters. They wrote the operating system for that CubeSat and had 27 experiments on board. That to me is the ultimate because it doesn't affect today. It's the generations to come that'll be challenged and can leapfrog off of what you've done.
Yeah.
So that's a win-win for me.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing that, you know, when we think about humanity, we have learned so much from previous generations, and every generation is leaving something to the next generation. And, you know, we're all temporary citizens here in this world. And so the legacy that we leave and the impact and the inspiration can be absolutely transformational for humanity. And there's nothing that I love more than talking with individuals like you who really are committed to do big things, thinking outside the box, like really, passionate about extraordinary things. And it's just a true honor, really true honor. So we're coming to the end of a podcast. So what I generally do, I give our guests a couple of minutes, just an open mic, so you can share, request, send a message, whatever you'd like to do for a couple of minutes.
All right. In closing, so I've got a rocket behind me coming back to Earth, and I would challenge you, again, on that 10% of your time, dedicate 10% to yourself, to self-improvement. And, it can be listening to podcasts, it can be listening to encouragement, it can be going out to TED and letting, rather than, your favorite TV program, go out on the TED site and listen to some of the visionaries and some of the people who are coming up with things that are off the wall creative. Let those things inspire you. We fill our minds with things that aren't eternally impactful. And if you can turn around a portion of the time of your life every day, every week, to go out there and seek yourself out, figure out what you really enjoy, what you seem to be good at, what your passion is, and look for those around you who can encourage you in that. And that's where you spend your time. We all have that friend that we spend time with, and when we come home, we're just drained, right, from that person. And you see it as an investment sometimes. But that's where you spend the less time. You need to also be in touch and have those people in your life. And sometimes you have to seek them out. Those people that will encourage you and push you to be the best you that you can be.
Thank you so much. John Quinn, exoaero.com. It's an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you today. And I'll conclude with a saying from the Talmud: if not now, when? And if not me, who? So if not taking action right now, then when are we going to take it? And then if not you, or me individually, right, each one of us, then who else is going to do this for us? So keep up the good work, everyone. Keep uplifting yourself and others, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Adam.